The return of Doug Messenger is here. It's been 1 year since you were last in the studio and made such an impression on the show, on the fans, on the listeners. I appreciate you so much for coming back, and there's been new developments that we're going to get into. But first things first, we put up 50 Eruption Van Halen work orders signed by Don Landy. They're at sunsetsoundstore.com. Use discount code Doug10 and grab one of these 50 because they'll be gone in 2 seconds. It's a perfect gift for Christmas. It's the actual work order of Eruption, which was only called Guitar Solo then. But
yes,
it's great for a collector, great for an office
Studio One.
Studio One. But Ted Templeman told me it was Studio 2, but I think he's mistaken. Anyhow, back to you. How you doing, Doug Messenger?
I'm fine today. Always happy to be at Sunset Sound.
Yes.
Because I've been around this place since the late 60s, early 70s, when Bill Robinson was the manager.
Yeah, and Bill Robinson was the manager at Capitol, came over here, and actually helped design our echo chambers. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's what we're here to do, is learn.
That. I'm here to learn.
I know. I am too. I mean, everybody, we're doing this together. You know, we kind of want to document this stuff, investigate, and really get to the bottom of these stories because people can say we're crazy or obsessed, but what do we care? It's a hobby. It's the greatest music ever. It needs to be. I want to know what color T-shirt Eddie was wearing when he was.
Oh, my God.
You know. So we're going to get to a lot of things. We're going to talk about the Unchained battle, which you were here for with Eddie Van Halen, Don Landy, Ted Templeman, where we went and we gave a studio tour earlier. We'll put that in this interview. But I talked to you on the phone 2 weeks ago, and you said, I've got some information, a cool talking point about Bill Church. Now, can you explain who Bill Church was?
Bill Church is a bass player who was mixed into the Van Halen brew as the stew was being put together. A lot of accidental stuff from the beginning. He was a bass player in a group called Sawbuck, and Ronnie Montrose was the guitar player in that group. And they had a front man named Mojo Collins. Pretty cool name.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened to him, but I heard a couple of Sawbuck things that it didn't have the Montrose touch at all. He was just a guitar player there. And he and Church quit to play on Tupelo Honey record with Van Morrison.
Produced by Ted Templeman.
I think that because Sawbuck was in Marin County, that Van had met Ronnie or seen him.
Yeah.
I think that's how it happened. And Ted did a very good job producing that record. But I have to give equal time to Ronnie Montrose because the guitar playing on that and the arranging, a lot of it was from Ronnie.
Wow.
I wasn't there, but I remember hearing Church talk about it when I met Church. And Bill Church, bass players never get what they should get.
Recognition.
But a great bass player makes a band better, and people don't realize it. Just as John Paul Jones and Led Zeppelin. Listen to the bass on what is and should never be. That is a bass part you can't equal.
Yeah.
And Church was a guy who, in a subtle, very American way, would do that with anything he played. Listen to Tupelo Honey, listen to the bass. St. Dominic's Preview record, he's on that with Van too.
Which you're on.
Although I was on, Ronnie had left to go to play with Edgar Winter, where they did Frankenstein and Free Ride, 2 big hits. And then Church rejoined Ronnie when they formed Montrose. And Montrose was the model for Eddie Van Halen, that he had. That band was what Eddie wanted to have for his own band with his brother. And so I'm going to explain a little more about Church. But if you listen to Church on St. Dominic's Preview, take a song, there's a little almost Vegas-like song on there called I Will Be There. Listen to the bass line in that thing. It's a little jazz song. It had been written as a triadic thing. Van had written it on a piano.
Yeah.
And I said, Van, I had heard it once up at his little studio he's putting together up at the house at 89 Spring Lane, which Jerry Heller got wrong in his book. But we
Jerry
can talk
Heller
about that
mentioned
too. Jerry Heller had something to do with Van Morrison. I'll tell you in a minute.
Wow.
I knew him very well. And
famous NWA producer, but he also produced rock and roll mainstream pop artists too, back in the day.
He was a very bright man, nice guy to be around, and tough as tough can be when he had to be.
I'd imagine if he was managing NWA.
Yes, he was.
But continue, please, with the...
So in any event, go and listen, just as an example, to I Will Be There, and listen to the bass line. It's a very melodic bass line that you might almost attribute to Paul McCartney, because McCartney was a bass player who didn't just play the roots at the right moments. He played lines that were in themselves melodic and good, and Church can do that too. And on that song, Church didn't do what most, if we had had Leroy Vinnegar or Ron Carter or one of the top jazz bass players, they would not have done I Will Be There as well as Bill Church did. They would have done walking bass lines, and that would have been it. But Church knew what to do. So anyway, move ahead to Montrose. Montrose is the model for Eddie Van Halen in his head when he's a kid, just trying to think about what he wants to do. And I think I'll jump to the end on that for a second here.
Cool talking point, though. It was your amplifier, your Marshall.
That's what I'm about to talk about.
Lead, which is, I think we might have discussed it on the other one, because it's, oh, Doug, someone's calling you. Is it Bill Church? But that's your Marshall that Ronnie Montrose is playing on Rock Candy, which was recorded here at Sunset Sound.
But in reading Ted Templeman's book recently, I saw that Eddie had, when they got to the point of doing the first Van Halen album, Eddie had asked Ted, and it's in Ted's book, could we get the amp that Ronnie Montrose used on Rock Candy? Little did they figure out that it was my Marshall that I had lent to the Montrose project through Steve Brandon, who was our roadie with Van Morrison and had been one of the guys who built the Grateful Dead monster PA system, the first monster system ever. And Steve Brandon had called me from Sunset Sound to say, we're down here with Ronnie. I knew Ronnie. I had met him a few times. I have a pretty salty story about him. I don't know if I should tell it.
Sure. Why? It's documenting.
When I met Ronnie, Bill Church and I got along great. When I joined Van, he was the nicest guy in the band. The first day I was there, he invited me to come up to his house, and he cooked dinner for me. Church is a great guy, and he lived up in Sonoma County, if I remember, near Santa Rosa.
Is this the one with Ronnie's wife?
Yeah. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, but go. I don't know if anyone else does.
Church called me one day, and he said, I told him that I really liked the guitar parts on Like a Cannonball and Wild Nights and the things that Ronnie had done for Van. And he said, well, let's go see Ronnie. And he lived in Fairfax, too, up near Van's place. Van was at 89 Spring Lane. And we went to see Ronnie, and he was about to go on the road with Edgar Winter. And Ronnie, at one point, Ronnie turned to me and Church. He says, when I'm gone, I don't want my wife screwing around with strangers. So if you guys want to partake, go ahead. I couldn't believe it. I said, Montrose, you're nuts. Of course, Church and I wouldn't do that.
Oh my!
Ronnie offered his wife as if he had the right to, which he didn't. Ronnie was a character.
Yeah, I'm sure he was kidding.
So what happened next with Church? Says he was with Van Morrison. We did St. Dominic's Preview. He played on 5 of the 7 songs. 2 songs were really from the Tupelo Honey sessions.
Yeah.
Almost Independence Day and Listen to the Lion. They were already done before we did the rest of the record. At some point, if you want to know how say Jackie Wilson said was put together. I can explain
We'll talk
it.
about some Van
Yeah.
stuff later.
So anyway, Church was there. Ronnie was off with Edgar Winter, and then Church. They did the Montrose record. Sammy Hagar as the lead singer, and
a lot of people don't know. I mean, if you're a fan of Montrose or Van Halen, but Sammy Hagar was in Montrose.
yes, he was the lead singer.
Yes, and Montrose was on Warner Brothers. Ted Templeman produced them.
Yes,
And they had success, nothing like Van Halen, but when Ted Templeman got to Van Halen, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with them because they were similar
yes,
to
that's
Montrose.
good.
And he wanted to get them in singles territory, Van Halen.
Agreed. That's a great point.
Yes.
And Montrose, on the Montrose record, there were some great songs, but Rock Candy is the one that everybody talks about because of two things: the drum sound and the guitar sound. And in Ted's book, he mentions that Eddie asked him, "Can we get that amp?" Well, apparently Ted forgot how they had gotten that amp through Steve Brandon, who was a friend of Church's, and I guess he knew Ronnie too. He was a Bay Area guy. And little did they know that was my Marshall. I didn't get to use it a lot in the early days of the 70s because the bands out here weren't into Marshalls yet. Smaller amps, clubs, and stuff like that. But later on, after Van Halen was well known, I sold that Marshall to guess whom? Eddie Van Halen.
I didn't know that. We didn't discuss that last
No,
time.
we
So
didn't.
what? So Eddie Van Halen owned the 100.
With 100-watt amp. He didn't even know it, and I didn't even mention it because I didn't know that Ted had asked Ted, "Could you find that amp?" I found that out recently, a few weeks ago, when I was reading Ted's book. That Eddie had said, "Hey Ted, could we get that? I'd like to hear that amp." This is before Eddie knew that his amp was amazing. His amp was We Know It.
So he's a Montrose fan. He wants that sound on Rock Candy, the amp from that, which was your amp. They couldn't find you, Ted didn't remember, but hold on one second. Ted wanted to find you, couldn't. So then where did they get an amp? They just used Eddie's?
Ted didn't try to find me. He didn't even know where it had come from. And I just learned this a few weeks ago, but I said, my God, that's the amp that I sold to Eddie somewhere after they did Fair Warning.
Oh, so
he bought an amp from me, and I remember running into him one day at the supermarket. I told you that story. And I said, "How do you like my Marshall?" He says, "It's a little too clean for me."
Did he come buy it from you personally, or was there a middleman?
They came to my apartment.
Oh, okay.
In those
So
days,
like 83 kind of, maybe 82,
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And he came to my apartment, 7934 Fountain Avenue.
He wanted
Hollywood.
to track down that amp. So he was, even when he was in here in 77, 78.
No, but he didn't know that had been the amp on Rock Candy, and I never mentioned it to him.
Well, why did he buy your amp then?
Because I had told him I have a Marshall that I'm not using right now. Do you want it?
Oh my
was
gosh!
total-
So then it happened to be the one he wanted
It just
anyway.
happened to be the one that had been used on Rock Candy.
That's the universe. For
Now,
you.
the story I heard about the recording of Rock Candy right here in this room, I think. No, it's in one.
Oh, Greg Renoff. Greg Renoff, the famous Ted Templeman author. We had a bet, and I said it was Studio 2 because you told me it was Studio 2. But now Greg said you're wrong. It's Studio 1 that Rock Candy was done in.
It might have been Rock Candy. I think some of the rest of it was done here, but
Thank
Rock
you,
Candy was done there. And the story that I heard was that Ted and Landy didn't know what to do with an amp that's that loud, right? People hadn't played them. People had super reverbs and twins and occasionally a small Marshall. And what they did, this is the story I heard, they aimed the amp at the glass door that's at the back of the room, of the main room. They aimed the amp at it from about, maybe we're this far from that door, and then they put a microphone, a tube mic, and I think they told him, I don't remember who told me this, so this could be all apocryphal.
Go with it.
This could be crap, but I think it's true because it sounds right. They put a tube mic behind the cabinet, And it was what you hear on the record is the amp bouncing back off the glass.
Wow.
They didn't put a mic right in front of it. Most condenser mics don't work well right up against a Marshall. You need an SM57 or a 421 Sennheiser. That'll do it, or an SM7. But in any case, when I hear that record, I can hear that there's a room to it. And so I believe that the story is true, that the mic was behind the amp, behind the cabinet, getting the guitar off the wall.
Wow. We need to go try that.
Yeah, you should. Get a good Marshall, but it has to be an old one.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a preamp. The difference between the Marshalls today and then is that I think they've reissued the ones with where you don't have you can't drive the front end. Because that's get you some more distortion, whereas the way those old Marshalls worked, it was the tail end of the amp that took the beating and the speakers. And that's why they were so loud. Just to get that to happen, it has to be maximum power. They don't dime it. They don't take it to 10, but you can get from 5 up. Those old Marshalls are loud. Even the 50-watt one will blow your head off. Just unbelievable that we put up with that. And picture Hendrix and Clapton with two double stacks playing right in front of that.
Holy cow.
They're deaf.
So what, can you tell everybody and myself exactly what the specs were and what model amp that was that Eddie bought? Because I think that's fascinating that he wanted that amp. They didn't know where to get it, but then he ended up with it anyhow.
Yeah, it was probably, the year was, I bought it out here.
Where at?
Valley News and Green Sheet. That's like
what a memory.
The equivalent of Craigslist today, And I bought it from some guy, and it was an old one from about 67 or 68, which didn't have the preamp, which came with the Mark II amps. Some of the early Mark IIs sound good. Like Phil X has one that sounds great, and he said it's because initially they didn't have the preamp do a whole lot, because it was a new thing for Jim Marshall. But later, all the Marshalls now, you can do extreme front end and get that mashed sound, that a lot of the metal bands like today. It's a very compressed sound. It doesn't leap out at you in the same way.
Yeah.
But so anyway, completely accidentally, Ed ended up with the Rock Candy amp.
I hope he knew that somehow. I mean,
he never. When I asked him what he thought of it, he said it's a little too bright for me.
Well, didn't you tell him that this is the amp on Rock Candy?
It didn't occur to me.
Oh my gosh!
I just sold it to him.
What'd you sell it to him for? How much?
$400.
$400.
And he came. He said, "I'll come back." I said, "No, take it now. Just pay me later." That's how it was.
What was he driving?
Huh?
What was he? What kind of car?
He had a little black car, and I think it was a Volvo. I'm not sure, but I remember he had come to the house
to play "Dance the Night Away."
The first mix of it.
Yeah, that was when he bought the amp, or was this different?
No, that was a few years later.
He wasn't still driving the Volvo, I don't think.
I don't know what he was driving, because I just remember he took the amp, and then later I ran into him somewhere, and he gave me the 400.
Wow.
And it's probably still there over at, did they sell his stuff or what happened?
At 5150? Wolfgang lives there.
That amp might be there.
That's cool.
But Ed didn't like it as much as his amp, and I agree with him. His amp was just superior. His amp was stolen at one point, and when it was returned, it had been modified and it never was right again.
Really?
So he didn't use it.
Where was it stolen from? A show?
I don't know where it was stolen. I didn't follow Van Halen closely. It was just like he and I were buddies. It was a telephone thing, for several years. And when he met Valerie, I stopped hearing from him.
I'm sure that he stopped responding to a lot of people when he got into a serious relationship.
Well, I was concerned about Jack Daniels and stuff like that.
As were a lot of other people.
And also some other stuff.
What was his amps? What was the amp that he had?
I think they were called JMP, the model. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I wasn't fanatical the way the kids are today. Today, the kids will even tell you the cabinet for that Marshall, was it particle board or is it wood, plywood? We didn't even think about things like that. We just bought the damn amp. It sounded good. We used it. It was a simpler world.
Yeah.
I see it all the time now, like kids arguing about which stomp box for distortion to get. Is it still okay to get the Tube Screamer by Ibanez? Is it right to get this? Is it right to get that? And I suggest the only ones that I knew that I did like. I said buy an Echoplex, which Eddie had one, or buy a Benson Echo Rec if you can find it. Buy an ADA flanger if you can find an old one, because the new ones don't have the same circuits. With the old ones that have the power cord comes right out of the box. You don't need a wall wart. That is the only flanger that should ever be owned by anyone. It's amazing. It makes the sound bigger, not smaller. Most stomp boxes take things down a notch. They make them louder, but the size of the sound is a little less. I don't know why.
So talk about Bill Church. Did he play on the Sammy Hagar solo stuff?
He played on every record that Sammy made.
Okay.
And he even played on some things with Sammy after they'd done the 8 records. They made 8 records together, but there's some 4 other things that have surfaced, and Bill's on those too.
Very cool.
But Bill never... He disappeared when Sammy left for Van Halen. But I hold that just as Eddie was a fan of Ronnie, and Ronnie was a terrific rhythm player and a good writer, he was at my studio in 2003 with Ricky Phillips from Styx and formerly from the Babies and John Waite. Rick Phillips played bass also on Page and Coverdale, Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
He played. He came, Ricky Phillips and Eric Singer, who's the drummer now for both Kiss and Alice Cooper. And they came with Ronnie in 2003 to do 10 songs that Ronnie had written. And Ronnie wanted to have 10 different singers. And there were some really good riffs and stuff that he had written. On the record that has been released, I don't recognize them because they were worked on so much that it doesn't... I only did guitar, bass, and drums. And we never got past that because Ronnie had a little brain freeze after we did the basic tracks for this record. It's out there. The record's called 10 by 10, 10 different singers. Glenn Hughes, Edgar Winter, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice.
Sammy Hagar is on that record. And I think that there was so much done after they took the tapes from my place and put them in a computer. I think they were played with so much that they lost that Montrose feeling. Because I have the record. They came by and gave me an LP and 2 CDs, and then they came back and we did an interview once, and they didn't use the interview. And I just got the impression that they probably realized that they had taken it somewhat away from the Montrose feel. Because there's a video of Ronnie in some bar up north with Dan McNay on bass, and I don't know the drummer's name, and a guy named Randy Scholes, a very good hard rock singer who's nobody ever heard of. And they're just doing a little fun thing one day, and some guy recorded it. There you hear Ronnie. You can feel just the way he hits a chord. It doesn't have the feeling of anybody else. And you'd think, so what? You hit an A chord, bah, it'll sound the same if it's, no. And Ronnie was playing a Bogner amp, and he had a Baker guitar. And when he was in my studio, but the record never got finished, and Ronnie died. He came down with cancer. I think it was throat cancer, I'm not sure. And he had chemotherapy and everything, and he thought he was okay. And then they told him, no, we've got to go in again. And then he killed himself.
Gun, right?
Was a gun.
A gun.
That's
Wasn't
the story.
there some talk that his wife had killed him? I don't want to be disrespectful, but I had heard that story.
Yeah, I've heard that story too, but I don't know. Wow. And the reason given to me was that he is that when you shoot yourself, you do it here or here
Yeah.
or here.
Yeah.
He was shot in the neck.
Oh my God! I didn't
This is
know
the
that.
story I heard. I wasn't there. I don't know. I haven't seen any police reports, but there's one theory that his wife, his second wife, not the one that he offered to us earlier.
So you didn't know that Unchained. I mean, I have this soundbite from Eddie Van Halen speaking, and he says a lot of Fair Warning was written on piano, including Unchained. And you didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that. I knew that he had written a few things. I think he wrote Jamie's Crying on a piano.
Oh wow, I didn't know
I'm
that.
not sure of that, but I have a vague recollection of that. And then, of course, later he did some great songs with Sammy. You know, and I think Sammy deserves more credit than he's given. For one thing, Eddie started playing guitar a lot. He became more of a keyboard guy, and every boy in America wants is more guitar. And so Eddie was pushed aside a little bit. But if you listen to his playing while he was with Sammy, it's pretty amazing too.
Yeah.
It might not be at the level of Top Jimmy and I'm the One and some of those songs, you know, but it's still amazing playing. Any way you look at it.
When you came in the studio that day for, in our last interview, and if you're new to this episode show or Doug, that we have a great episode that we did a year ago, where we talk about Doug Messenger being at the Starwood the night that Van Halen played, and Ted Templeman coming in, and also Doug calling the Warner Brothers office and trying to notify them about Van Halen.
That was before Starwood.
Well, yeah,
6
you've been doing
months
it for
before
months.
the
You'd been calling there,
Since
speaking with
February,
Joni, his assistant,
late
at Rock
January,
Corporation.
early
you
Rock
were at.
Corporation, yeah.
But fast forward, and if you want to watch that interview, it's up. It's amazing. It's also on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, etc. But I need to know what guitar Eddie was playing on the Unchained sessions. Was it the red and white one or the black and white one? Let's go back.
On the Unchained session.
When you came in that
I
day, and he
wasn't
said
focused.
he put the guitar on you, and you played the guitar in that
was a
corner.
different day, though.
Yeah. But
I had come in another day, and he showed me the amp when I was sitting over here.
Oh, okay.
And
so you came in twice on Fair Warning. You came in a couple times.
Yeah, I came in, and I walked in, came in through that door, and he came out, and he says, "Here, I want to play my guitar," and he put it on me, and I said, "I don't tap." He says, "You don't have to tap. I just want to hear my amp," because he had told me so much about it, and I'd heard it. So I played a few chords and stuff, and I said, and it was amazing. It wasn't as loud as my Marshall.
Yeah.
Probably because he's running it at 90 volts. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that Variac thing, that running a lower voltage into the amp gets a little different sound. And so I had done that. But and I don't remember which guitar it was, but if I were pressed, I think it was the black and white one.
Okay, really? All right,
But remember, that's several records after the black and white guitar. So it might have been the red and white one. See, I just can't.
We're going black and white.
I'd have to
Final
guess.
answer.
That's
simply incredible, though. 19 was that Fair Warning? So,
80,
roughly 30 years
82,
ago
83.
now, or no, 40 years ago, you walked through that door 40 years ago.
Yes.
There's nothing that's changed in this room. You came through that door right behind me and walked up here and played Eddie Van Halen's guitar in
Yes,
Studio
I did.
2 at Sunset Sound.
Yes, I did, and he was laughing, and he's,
That's so cool.
There was one riff that I had that I still remember now, and I remember playing this riff for Phil X a couple of years ago, because Phil came to my studio for 15 years, every year, once a year, to do the American Music Awards background music, Country Music Awards background music, Billboard music, and I played the riff that I played here for Eddie for Phil, and he said, "You didn't write that." Phil's never heard me play. He never was around when I was a player. I said, "Believe me, I wrote that."
Do you remember the riff?
Yes, I do.
Can we get an acoustic guitar to play, or do we need electric? I have Orianthi's guitar in my office, plus Joe Bonamassa's
Next time I
Dumble
see you,
amp.
I could do it.
We got to know what that riff was.
Yeah.
You remember the riff?
Yeah, it was a very kind of It would have fit in a Van Halen song, but the chord progression was a little fancier when it got to the verse. I don't know if I can play right now. See, I have arthritis. Look at my crooked finger.
I've heard you play. You're a genius guitar player.
Crooked finger.
Well, we'll do it before we leave and edit it.
I'll sell crooked fingers since everyone likes me.
So how did you come down that day, though? Did Eddie call you and said, "Hey, we're tracking fair warning"?
Yeah, he just called me out. The way Eddie and I met him at the Rock Corporation and got his number and Dave Roth's number. I never called David Roth.
Yep.
I never have talked to him, never have talked to Alex or Michael Anthony, ever. It was exclusively me and Ed talking.
It's the guitar
we
bond.
We just hit it off. We were guitar players, and we never even talked about Rock Candy. I did hear him say, I wanted a band like Montrose.
Yeah.
He said that.
And Templeman wanted a band like Montrose that he could do right and put him in singles territory.
So I'd say that Ted Templeman deserves a lot of credit for bringing that to fruition, to making it happen. Because when I've heard the demo that Gene Simmons did here too, right?
No, Electric Ladyland. They did.
They did that at Electric. Yeah. When you hear that demo and then you hear what Ted and Don did, it's a world of difference.
It's
from just a band to wow, it's Van Halen.
Let's discuss that then. Okay, so obviously, go ahead. You have something else?
First time I ever heard about Van Halen was in Pasadena. One day, a kid, I was looking at the Valley News and Green Sheet, and there was a little Marshall amp, a little 212, 410s. They made it with 212s. They made it with 410s. Not a very good Marshall. There was one 212 Marshall that's amazing, but hard to find. So anyway, I went out to see this amp, and I was sitting there playing. I said, well, thank you for showing it to me. It was a high school kid. And he said, yeah, I don't play it much. And, and I said, oh, it's not for me. And he said, you've got to hear the local hero. I said, who's the local hero? His name's Eddie Van Halen. You got to see Van Halen. Yes. So the name was embedded in my head. And when I walked into the Rock Corporation in February of 77, right, that was probably in 76 when I heard the name Van Halen. And they apparently were already known in Pasadena. And when Go
ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we talked about that story last time of you seeing them at the Rock Corporation. But there is something there that a lot of people didn't like, that you said that tapping is showing off.
Okay.
Let's elaborate on that.
When tapping is all you do, it's showing off. I'll rectify it.
Yes.
Because I realized that I had been a little harsh about it. But I do think that the better lead playing is less involved in something like tapping. Because in tapping, Eddie was amazing at it because he would come up with little melodic things in it. Most people, when they tap, they just do a blur of fast notes. And there's no theme, no motif.
Yeah.
So in that sense, tapping leads most guitar players just to use their youthful, reflexes, because you have to have very good reflexes to do tapping.
Yeah.
To do it fast, the way it's done today. Like they sweep across arpeggios to go like 4 notes in a fraction of a second. That's impressive, but that's high school stuff. In high school, we always like the guy who's the loudest, the guy who's can throw the ball the hardest, the guy. Speed and strength are a big deal to teenage boys. And Eddie Van Halen, though, reached beyond the boys. A lot of the women liked him a lot too.
Eddie was pretty.
He was pretty, but he also, his playing was accessible. It wasn't just a lot of notes.
Sure, it was melodic.
Now, later on, when he would do Eruption, he'd go on and on for 30 minutes on Eruption. And, at that point, I say, where's my Coke? I'll drink it.
Oh, I don't know about that. That's Eruption is boring to you?
Well, I heard it so many times.
Well, hasn't everybody? It gets better every time I hear it.
It is pretty amazing, but that's Eddie Van Halen. But in general, the way most people do it, they're 8-year-old girls who can play Eruption.
A little bit of
Have
my
you
heart
seen them
just broke.
On YouTube?
8-year-old girls playing Eruption?
Yes, and they can do it. because it's more about reflexes.
If you send me an 8-year-old girl that can play Eruption, I will give her a free day in the Sunset Sound, and she can come in here and play it on this
Well,
channel.
I could look for her. I've seen it.
8-year-old girls
I've
playing
seen
Eruption?
10-year-old girls. I've seen
Now they're
15-year-old
18.
boys and girls, 18-year-olds. A lot of people can play Eruption. And I say a lot of people couldn't do, but a lot of people could not possibly do, let's say, Little Wing by Hendrix.
I think I disagree with you, Mr. Messenger.
You think people could play Little Wing well? No.
Over Eruption? I think Little Wing would be easier to play.
It's harder because Little Wing has a very R&B kind of groove to it. And when I've heard even Stevie Ray Vaughan doing Little Wing, it's not quite as cool as Hendrix.
I can agree on that.
Stevie Ray is as badass a guy as ever lived. I watched him at the Palladium once. In 3 hours, he didn't miss a single note.
SRV?
Huh? SRV.
Stevie, yeah.
He was incredible. A more precise guitar player than any of them.
Really?
Just amazing. And I'm not a big fan of Texas blues. I love early Johnny Winter. I love ZZ Top. I love Albert Collins.
Doyle Bromhall?
Huh?
Do you like Doyle Bromhall and the second? Doyle Bromhall. Do you know him?
Oh, yeah. He's amazing. You ever hear Oh Death?
Yeah.
That's incredible. It's an old Charlie Patton song, and he's made it into something brilliant. Yeah, Doyle Bramwell. But the average bar band in Texas, it's pretty boring. It's 3-chord blues, and okay, we've heard this. Johnny Winter got worse as he got older, but I'll tell you, those first few records, like Second Winter and the first one too, they were terrific records.
Yeah.
And Johnny could sing.
Let's go back to this Eruption talk, though.
Okay. No, I love Eruption by Eddie Van Halen.
You think it's a little boring, though. I mean, it's not your cup of tea, I'll say.
I say it's a little boring when I've heard it 50 times, and when he does it, you're kind of waiting to see, okay, what's he going to do this time? And that keeps your interest. But it isn't as compact and brilliant as the one on the record. That thing is so perfect. There's no wondering what I'm going to do next. It was all, and when he was at his best, that's how he was. You'd think that he'd written it, and he hadn't. He could ad lib, but most people can't do that. When they start,
he did write that. He had been playing that for a while, and then brought it into Sunset. You know the story. And Don Landy or Ted Templeman. Hold on, Ted Templeman was like, "Roll tape on this," and Don's like, "I have been," and they were doing Eruption, but
was it the same every time?
I mean, I don't know. It's on some demos
we've
heard.
Into that.
We should, but also we have a video up on our YouTube channel. Brian Kehoe, who's assigned to the Van Halen, Warner Brothers put him in the vault. He brought in the room mic version of it to prove, it's one take, and they bust in right into "You Really Got Me" right afterwards.
Yeah. Check. And someone told me on "Really Got Me" he didn't use his guitar. That he used an Ibanez.
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
Yeah,
didn't we?
Thing had as good a sound as his guitar.
Yep,
amazing guitar.
And we have a picture of it actually. I'll put it up right now. That Greg Renoff, the Ted Templeman author, supplied us with. That Don Landy took in Studio One, and Eddie Van Halen is holding that guitar. Let's talk about Don Landy. Don watches this show, which I think is one of the coolest things in the world. Don bought a work order from us. I hope he's watching right now. Don, we would love to talk to you in any capacity. It doesn't have to be video. We could do audio. I would love to just have a coffee with you, not even broadcast it. But I think he's so important to Van Halen's sound. And what we were even discussing just a moment ago about the vast difference between the Gene Simmons demos and the Van Halen demos, where they came in here, 25 tracks, 10 rolls of tape in this room. And why, in your opinion, why is Don Landy the best engineer for Van Halen specifically? He was a great engineer for everybody, but why was he so great for Van Halen?
Well, I think that Don didn't study the other hard rock records that were out, by Ozzy and
Great answer. Yeah.
other people like that. And he had been present because he was the engineer on Montrose.
Yes.
And he learned some things in doing the Montrose record. Like he improved the drum sound on the Montrose record is really only sensational on Rock Candy. The rest of it's good. And the amps weren't as good as the Marshall, but it was good. And Ronnie wrote great parts, And when I made a comment that I want to take back about Ronnie.
Sure.
Ronnie was never what I'd call a lead player, a guitar hero that way.
Yeah.
Where he's a guitar hero. He's a good, solid lead player, but very simple. Very simple. But as a rhythm player and as a songwriter,
He's a beast.
He's as good as anyone.
Well, you kind of like more melodic solos too. I mean, that's kind of your
Yes, I
thing.
do.
You like Richie Blackmore's, what's that one
Well,
song?
I liked Highway Star.
Highway Star, which has a
That
great.
to me is a brilliant solo.
Yes, I mean, to each their own. So, yeah, Ronnie was a great rhythm player. He had some good
An
leads.
example about solos. On Thunderstruck, the famous video of Thunderstruck, the solo playing that Angus does there, okay, it worked, but it's nothing memorable. What was memorable is the whole damn video and his being able to sustain that stuff for that long, for 4 minutes without blowing it. Wow. Pretty amazing. See, he's like same as the guys in Judas Priest. They're excellent rhythm players, but they're not really guitar heroes the way Eddie is. Ronnie was verged on being a guitar hero, but Eddie did it.
Yep.
But Eddie would credit Ronnie for giving him a vision, and Don kept the vision as well, because Don had been there for the Montrose record.
And Ted's so honest and complimentary of Don Landy. He says Van Halen would not be Van Halen without Don
He had
Landy.
a good ear not to make things too harsh. He a good ear of making the kick drum fat, which people didn't do in those days.
Yep.
Now, it wasn't a room sound on the drums. It was close-up mics right over there. Wasn't that the corner?
Where the drums were?
Yeah, on
For
some
that
of the Van
picture,
Halen
they
stuff.
put him over there. But I was told that's another thing. We got a lot of work to do because Peggy McCreary, the Prince engineer, she was an assistant on Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2.
And she's the one to ask.
But right in the other room, I should go get them from Paul right now. We have the room charts for that day that she hand wrote out where the drums go, and we would keep those. All were handwritten, so the drums were right where I was sitting, and that's still where every
So they were
engineer.
here?
Yes,
Cool.
from what I'm told.
So that picture, that's famous picture,
Yeah, that was
is
all
just a promo picture.
And Niels Lozauer, who took that picture, was in here 2 weeks ago, and we interviewed. We had a discussion. He's hilarious. Have you ever met him?
No.
But anyways, there's beer cans everywhere. Like, they worked during the day. They were
Well, that
professional.
looked all set
Ted
up.
Temple wasn't letting them get completely smashed on Van Halen 1. They were hungry kids, and I don't think there was any of those issues that had came in yet. But from my understanding, the drums are right where I was sitting, facing into the glass. Because also, I can't remember right off the top of my head, but Ted's book talks about he loved being able to see through the glass and see all four members right here. So if
You wouldn't
Alex,
have seen him well there.
well, you know what? I could be, please don't crush me, people, but I kind of remember him saying something that the drums maybe were over there. I got to read the book again for the third time.
Well, when I came,
Greg
to play-
Renoff would know too.
When I played Ed's guitar in here, there was no drum kit in the room. They were past that.
Oh, okay. So they were doing like overdubs or something.
Well, that's what it appeared to be for Unchained. And Eddie wanted to just play what he had played the day before that had been erased.
What were they working on when you came? Not the Unchained day, but what were they came when you came through that door and played his guitar?
I didn't hear
know what they
anything.
were- you didn't say
I
like,
was
oh, we're
here
working
I
on.
was here for 10, 15 minutes. No one was here, just me and Ed. And just Ed and I. But go back to Don Landy.
Yes, but I do want to talk about, though, I want to go back to Don Landy, but we need to know about Mean Street. I need to know if there's anybody that has information on how that was tracked, where it was tracked.
Which
Mean Street, to kick off the Fair Warning album. My favorite song ever.
I
The
don't
intro
know.
for that is literally the
I just don't know.
Yeah.
That intro is probably the greatest moment in guitar tapping ever, because it's a combination of what bass players did with the thumb and the tapping with these fingers.
Yes.
The thumb was involved in that one.
Yep.
Unbelievable. It's such a phenomenal, and Landy got the reverb they put on that it can't be any better. It's just phenomenal.
Yep. Well, let's go back to Don, and then my question still stands, and elaborate for me. What made Don Landy the best engineer for not just music, but for Van Halen specifically?
He almost overdid the reverb on the first record. Almost, but not quite. I think the second record is for the way, and Fair Warning are the two that I like the sound of best.
Big time.
And
which one? Fair Warning. What else?
Fair Warning and Van Halen 2.
Oh, well, Van Halen 2, we found it was not mixed here. It was mixed at Amigo. Did you know that?
No, I knew that they didn't like tracking over there, but I didn't know they had mixed some stuff there.
Yeah, I think.
But Don Landy could do he could mix well almost anywhere.
Sure.
And he knew.
But you can tell that it's not.
Yeah.
If it was not all the tracks, it was
It
most
all
of the tracks.
sounds like Don to me. Even 1984, which is none of this gear. It's all up at the house, right?
See, I disagree completely with you, and I think a lot of people. I disagree with you completely.
What?
You can't tell the difference from the Sunset Sound records to the 1984.
No, I can hear the sound, but it's still very good.
Sure. Oh,
and
yeah.
the drums,
it's like pizza.
The drums on 1984 might not be real drums.
Well,
it almost sounds to me like those Simmons drums.
That's what the Simmons
It
drums.
is?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I've always told people that sounds like fake drums. But the overall vibe is still Van Halen.
Because in 5150, they couldn't fit Alex's kit in there.
Right.
And Alex had this, affinity with
No,
Simmons
I wasn't
drums.
saying that it sounded, things done here are the best sounding Van Halen records.
Sure. Okay.
And when other guys like Fairbairn and some of those other guys did stuff, it was more like what a lot of people were doing, and it lost the Van Halen taste.
Gotcha.
It was like, here I am at Chick-fil-A when I want to be at Pioneer Chicken, or whatever it was back then. That's the difference. Don had a good idea about making it sound rich and thick.
Yep.
And he had the patience to sit through endless punching ins on Roth's vocals, from what I heard.
What's a favorite drum song of Van Halen that you like with Don Landy? Like, what's really identifiable?
Drum sound or drum performance?
Yeah, like Lost of Control, I'm the One, Out of Love Again. Like, those are some of my favorite drum songs. What's like a song where you really hear Alex on? Or Out of Love Again. And, it's almost like jazz. It just
What song do you like?
Out of Love Again. I mean, I like them all, but I think that one, he's just so aggressive and he's all over the kid on it. We talked about this with Glenn.
I just like his general groove. I mean, I love Jamie's Crying for the little tom thing. That's so nice that the hip-hop guy used later for that Wild Thing song. I like I'm the One just because it's a train wreck ready to happen that doesn't go off the rails.
Yes.
And Eddie said that he played the solo while doing the rhythm track. That he just kept playing, and he told me, I can't play that solo. I don't know what the hell I did.
See, we need to remember these things. It's so great you state that.
Yeah, he said, I don't remember how I did it. And I said, it's amazing. The solo on I'm the One is incredible. And he's doing it throughout the song. There isn't just the solo. There are other spots where he's taking off. And he said, I was just doing a take, and we figured we'd do a simpler version. We never got to it. We knew this is it.
See, that's another thing. Dweezil Zapp and I discussed the spontaneity, that things where they did one time in the studio, and it can never be recreated. It's just in that moment. You play guitar, I play guitar. It's like I do stuff, and then I record almost everything I do because I want to remember how even before I start a little record on my voice memo, I tell myself exactly what the key it's in, how my fingers are phrased on the guitar, everything, because I want to know, because there could be those things that happen.
I think that Eddie took chances sometimes.
Of course.
Where he said, the hell with what I thought before I did it. And he would just do it, and it was working, and maybe he'd say, let's do that again. now I've got it, but he was a very open to improvising, as you see when he takes 40 minutes to do Eruption today.
Or the Mean Street intro that he kept advancing on.
Yeah.
There's another great video we have up about.
I've never heard the other versions of it.
Oh, I got to play it for you. It's this melodic, insane.
All those little things he did, like the intro to Women in Love, the intro to Top Jimmy. I love those things. They're just so well done.
You know, a great track to listen to Don Landy's drums is Dirty Movies. You feel like you're in the room with
Yes, that's that's one of my favorite tracks now that you mention it.
Yeah.
For drums. That's on Fair Warning, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's somewhere on the
record.
second side, partway through, yeah. That's a great song. They were... Now, another reason the stuff at 5150 doesn't sound as good, the gear wasn't as good as this gear.
Sure.
It's thinner sounding. It's not, partly that the drums were fake drums played, but they were fake. And that's a narrower, not as broad a sound. And Landy was good at getting a broad sound from everyone. The bass was very natural, a P bass, Fender P bass, doing what it does. No stomp boxes, nothing added. That's another thing. Landy stayed away from a lot of effects. Eddie used a little Phase 90 phase shifter on some of the songs. He might have used it on Ain't Talking About Love.
Yeah, weren't we talking about that?
It was a shitty little phaser. It wasn't that good. Too bad he didn't have an 88 flanger, because buy one if you guys can find one. But get the original. With the original, it has to look beaten up, and it has to have no wall wart. It's going to have a real chord. It's the most amazing box imaginable. Makes things bigger, not smaller. Most stomp boxes make things narrower, and Landy kept things broad, so that those first 5 records are rich sounding. Women and Children First, that's a rich sounding da da da. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, Ed could play a simple thing. That's just a ninth chord. You know, it's a triad where he uses the ninth instead of the third of the chord. Da-da-da-da-da. Most guys that do that, so what? Eddie Van Halen does it, and you go, man, that's cool.
Big time.
He's a guy, when you knew him, I miss him.
Yes.
I've been around a lot of people in this business, and I don't give a shit about most of them. There's people who are revered. No, Eddie Van Halen. You have to hold him in high esteem. The same with Jimi Hendrix. There's a certain personality involved which you cannot duplicate. A vision that these guys had. Hendrix liked Barney Kessel, jazz player, and you can hear that on Little Wing, and Kessel's made it sound a little, if you listen to the Julie London record, Julie is her name, some of the guitar stuff on that song, Cry Me a River, is reminiscent of what Hendrix did through a Marshall on some of those prettier songs of his.
Yeah, wow.
And he liked Barney Kessel. He never told me this. And he did tell me he liked Curtis Mayfield.
Jimi Hendrix told you he liked Curtis Mayfield.
Yes, when we were talking that day, I said, so what did you, I saw you with Joey D and the Starlighters playing a left-handed jazz master, or a right-handed one upside down, and a super reverb amp when I heard him with Joey D and the Starlighters.
Yeah.
And I said, but even there I could hear that you had been through what I was going through in Boston. In Boston, it was all R&B. There were no rock bands. None until 1971. Aerosmith, somewhat the Jay Giles Band. They're not really a rock band, but it was all R&B and jazz and classical in Boston until 1969. I don't know why. Maybe because of Berklee School of Music. There were no rock and rollers, and I loved rock and roll. And I had the first Zeppelin record, that came out, and I saw them play at the Psychedelic Supermarket. And they were called the New Yardbirds the first time they played here. And I didn't know what to make of it because it was so different. Like you have songs like Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You or Ramble On. It's taking blues, elements of the blues, and then putting some other chord progressions in there that you go, man, that is really clever. Pagey, man, he's another guy. Among the guitar players, you've got to mention Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Cliffy Gallup and Gene Vincent's group, Elvis Presley's guy, Scotty Moore.
Les Paul,
Franny Beecher, the guy on Rock Around the Clock. I defy guitar players today to play that solo. I don't think I could do it.
and I mean,
There were great guitar players, but Hendrix and Clapton changed the whole perspective of everything.
I would say Buddy Guy too. I'm from Chicago.
Yeah, Buddy Guy, but people didn't hear him right away
No,
till after Hendrix and Clapton.
but
Buddy Guy.
Clapton heard Buddy Guy.
Oh, you bet. Another guy that Clapton heard was Albert King.
Of course, I love Albert.
Albert King had a record called I Love Lucy. You ever hear that?
Of course.
It's incredible. And he was a piece of crap person, though, I'll tell you. I mean, B.B. King is a doll. He would, if he were to walk into this room right now, within 3 minutes, you'd want to go up to him. He was so nice.
I've met him a few times, actually. He actually did a live record here. B.B. King, live at Sunset Sound, 1971.
Wow.
It's available right now. Look it up.
I'll look that up.
Yeah.
He was, and the other King, Freddie King, was a nice guy.
Texas guy.
And I backed him once at the Lions Share up in what is that town? San Anselmo.
And Freddie King hung out with Jim Morrison, didn't he?
I heard that. I didn't know it. I didn't know
I
it.
think there's a
But he was there, and a guitar player that was supposed to show up didn't show up, and I was out there. In fact, Van had gone home. We had gone into Sausalito, and we ran into Carlos Santana, and we were talking to Carlos, and Carlos and I spoke in Spanish, and we were having fun making Van wait. Just talking everything in Spanish and looking at Van as if we were talking about him. Carlos is a fun guy. He's married to Cindy Blackman now.
I just talked to Carlos. I executive produced Orianthe's latest record. We recorded in this room the last 3 months. And Carlos called Orianthe because he's going to play on a track.
Oh, cool.
And she put it on speakerphone. And we all talked to Carlos Santana 2 weeks ago. But yeah, he lives in Vegas. He does his residency there. And then his wife, that's Lenny Kravitz.
I've recorded Cindy Blackman at my studio.
That's Lenny Kravitz, old drummer.
Yeah. She's a great drummer.
Phenomenal.
She's better than Lenny Kravitz. Believe me. Lenny Kravitz did the right thing for his songs.
Yeah.
But she's more of a drummer.
All right, let's go back to Don Landy just for a moment. What do you think? What did he do to Eddie's? Go ahead.
Don made, I think, a great choice in putting the guitar left and putting the reverb right, because he wanted everything to be, people who have recorded a lot and who have done a mono recording once in a while, or a recording where one instrument was stuck over here, the fidelity when you don't have two speakers agreeing on what something sounds like, the fidelity out of one speaker has something extra to it. And I think Don knew that, and he said, I'm putting this amazing guitar over here. And we can put some reverb over here. I don't know if you can hear some reverb here. I never really paid attention. But Don had a great sense of balance. That's how I see it. He's a very nice man.
While at the same time being aggressive.
Yeah.
In his mixes.
He's a sweetheart. He's a very nervous guy, if I remember. The last time I saw Don was when Guitar Center opened in Hollywood. They had a big party. Were you there?
No, but you told us this story twice.
I told this story before. Yeah, and Ed and Don came in, and I was up on the steps looking down, and I saw them, and Ed saw me, and he came up the steps pushing through the crowd. It was like 5,000 people in one building. It was insane. And Ed, there was a little office right at the top of the steps, and I didn't even see it, and Ed just opened the door and pushed Don and me into the room. Eddie pushed us into the room. He says, peace and quiet, and we just sat up there for 2 or 3 hours just talking. That was it.
2 or 3 hours in a closet talking with Eddie
Well,
Van
that
Halen?
may be 2 hours. But we were just, you could look out, there's a window there. window. The whole thing was windows, and you could see down. The staircase went over this way.
Yeah,
the office was right up here, and we just talked a lot, And my wife Cindy was out there in the crowd because she liked crowds. Spider Taylor's singer.
Okay, now you said the two words, and a lot of viewers have been helping out on this. Spider Taylor was in a band called Pod, but Eddie Van Halen and you went to see Spider Taylor, and Eddie Van Halen said to you about Spider Taylor.
Yes.
What did he say?
He said that guy, and he didn't say it the night that Eddie was there at the Starwood, where we were watching my soon-to-be wife's band with Spider. We were talking one day. It was on the phone, if I'm not mistaken, and he said, that guy, that Spider guy, man, he's amazing. He's as good as it gets, and nobody knows him. And that was how it came out. It was a simple little statement that he loved the way Spider Taylor played.
Didn't he say he was the best guitar player he'd ever seen or something?
He said he's the best guy I've seen in California.
Wow.
Spider Taylor didn't play. He wasn't a metal guy. He was just a very good guitar player. The way you imagine the best studio guy in town. He could play beautifully put together solos, and he knew how to play behind the singer. And Pod was a strange band. Roy Thomas Baker was going to produce them, but Roy really had more an idea of trying to bed my soon-to-be wife, and she wouldn't go for it. She said,
boy.
"Roy, you're dreaming. You're never getting me." And she quit the business because of him. But we've seen Roy since then. I still see Cindy once in a while, and it's been about 10 years, but Roy invited us up to his house on Sunset Plaza Drive, I think it's called. It's on the right. We went to his house once. This is about 20 years ago, and he cooked for us. He's a good cook, by the way. Roy Thomas Baker. He's funny, smart as hell. He's crazy, too.
Wow.
He had a wife named Barbara who was managing bands. I think she managed Ozzy for a while.
Really?
I think. Ask Roy if you ever talked to him. Did your wife Barbara ever manage some big rock bands? I think that's what she did. I never met her. It was just Roy and me and Cindy, and we had a ball talking to him. He's a fun guy to be around. Mike Chapman is a fun guy to be around, but he's a guy who ruined his career because of
cocaine.
First time I met him, he was Mike Chapman. Do you know who Mike Chapman was, guys? Mike Chapman?
They don't.
No? He produced Blondie, Exile, The Knack, that song, The Warrior by Patti Smythe. This is a guy who had something like 25 straight single number one, Billboard number one, more than anybody before or since. And he called me once because I had done a guitar overdub for him, and he said, "I have a girl. I'm not sure if I want to record her in my new label." He was putting a label together. This is history now, this part. A label called Dreamland Records. Mm-hmm. And I figured out why the label failed, and it was intentional. I think that he and Nicky Chin had tax problems, and they said, let's start our label and let's make everything be a failure, and we can write it all off on the books. That's what I think happened. No one ever said this. This is my theory. But Mike Chapman called me. He says, I need to have a demo on a girl named Holly Penfield, and I'd like to have it by Thursday. This was a Monday. And I said, Jesus, I don't know what she does. He says, well, I'll go. I had met her. Because she was a friend of Bud Prager's too. Holly Penfield is the guy who managed Foreigner, and he liked Holly, and I think that's why Chapman was interested in her. So I had a little band I was putting together. We went into Sound Labs, Armin Steiner's place behind Capitol. That was the best sounding studio in L.A. Better even maybe than this. Maybe.
That's sacrilegious.
We don't say that. You don't put it in. Just
get him the fuck
edit, cut it out. Get out of here. Get out of here, messenger. No, Armin Steiner's place was a Dean Jensen Quad 8, right? The early quad 8 and a Stevens. Unbelievable what those two together.
Well, Led Zeppelin didn't go there. They came here.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, your Studio One is partly designed by Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my board at my studio is
Yep.
Dean Jensen.
Dean Jensen boards.
I
Also,
would-
speaking of Doug's studio, he has an amazing studio that's open now for the public if anybody would like to record. It's over in North Hollywood. It's Doug Messenger's studio. You can look it up. There's also a great Instagram page, Doug Messenger's, where you can connect with him. There has his email, phone number if you'd like to book some studio time. But that's a great room you have over there. I mean, you guys did Jimmy Eat World. You did At the Drive-In, a couple records, which was later Mars Volta. Joe Bonamassa did his first
We
recordings
did Hey
over
There,
there.
Delilah.
Hey
We
There,
did
Delilah.
Animal by Neon Trees. We did all of those bands except from the early 2000s, except Green Day.
And he has one of the most historic, awesome Stevens tape machines that he will not sell to me. But you said you are leaving it to me in your will, right?
Maybe.
Oh,
Perhaps.
but Rumors was mixed on that tape machine.
Rumors mixed.
Fleetwood Mac Rumors.
The
The Wall, Pink Floyd. The Wall was
Ken
mixed on
Calais
that.
was the guy who told me that I had found accidentally the Stevens that had been at Producer's Workshop that did The Wall. I know they spent 1,600 hours, 1,600 hours making The Wall at the Producer's Workshop. They had started a couple of things in Paris, another 2 days or 3 in New York at A&R, I think, and then they came here and there were 1,600 hours. That's a crazy amount of hours.
Yeah.
But listen to that record. It's incredible.
Let me ask you a question, which I think is one of the coolest events to ever happen, is Eddie Van Halen comes to your house over on Fountain Avenue here in Hollywood, pulls up, you jump in, he says, hey, we just mixed Dance the Night Away. Let me play it for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get much cooler than that. How did
That was
he called you and said he must have left Sunset and like rolled over to your house and
Yeah.
said, we just mixed it. I got the tape.
Yeah.
And he played
He
Dance
must
the Night
have
Away
come
for you.
straight
What were
from
your
Sunset.
immediate thoughts and reactions on Dance the Night Away?
I thought right away, this is a Ted Templeman song. Ted will like this because it's radio potential. And Ted was very aware of the importance of getting a hit on the radio. For any band, it helps. Whether it's Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, it doesn't matter who you are, or James Brown for that matter. You want the single. And I said, this is a single. And it got to the point where the guitar, they paused the song, and the guitar is playing something with a phaser, but the guitar is quite out of tune at that part. And I was telling Eddie, you should redo that guitar part. And he said, no, I don't care about this song that much. He said, it's good enough. He said, it's good enough. And it is. Nobody's ever told me the guitar is out of tune in that spot because Eddie's usually in tune.
Yeah, sure.
And that's probably Don Landy leaning on him, saying that G string has to come up. Don Landy is a very meticulous guy, very nervous, like when he had his head down on the console while Ed was trying to think of what to do about Unchained. I knew Don was having a nervous breakdown. And he said at one point, he says, we do anything here, I might get fired. I might get fired. And I think Ed said something like,
Don said I might get fired?
Huh?
Don said I might get fired?
Yeah, I think he was concerned that maybe Ted would be mad because Ed was going to go and play something without Ted being there.
See, we spoke with Ted, and I brought that up, and and Greg Renoff had reiterated this, that he was a VP at Warner Brothers, plus he was producing like 3 artists, over at
Doobie
Amigo,
Brothers.
Doobie Brothers here, Van Halen in this room, so he had to move around, but he said he always knew what Don was doing. But Peggy McCreary said the same thing, that they came
There
in
was
and
no
secretly
assistant here that
remixed. Oh, well,
The
Peggy
Unchained Day, I didn't see anyone in there, just them.
Okay, because
Ted
Peggy
and-
McCreary said that they secretly remixed an album. She said that, but then
I believe that because what happened that day was a secret kept from Ted. Maybe they told him later, I redid the guitar on Unchained. But at the moment, I could see that Don was nervous about it.
yeah,
Because I was saying, go ahead, do it again. And then I left. I said, I've gone far enough with this, and I left.
I would love for him
And then
to
when they finished the record, Ed called me, and I met them out in the parking lot here. They were going to party here, but when I got here, everyone was in the parking lot, a whole bunch of people. And Eddie had his arm around Valerie and his right arm around a bottle of Jack Daniels. And I told him, I said, Ed, that's bad. Don't do it. I
They
told
had
him.
just finished the record then.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was the end of it. It was over. We just finished it, and I don't know what we're going to do. Come on over, and da-da-da. And I came over, spoke to him in the parking lot for a while, and then I didn't stay. I don't know why. I didn't stay.
Because you've never drank, have you?
No.
You never had one sip of alcohol.
Well, I've had a sip or two, but I don't drink.
Yeah, gotcha. That's great.
And under certain circumstances, I know it's smart. These guys are having some brandy. I'll take some brandy.
Yeah, I totally get it. I think it's amazing.
I don't care what you do as long as you don't hurt yourself.
Yep. And look at all
I know
the
people
famous
who did
artists.
cocaine for 10 years and came out of it with no damage.
Sure.
Ray Charles, heroin all his life and some damage, but not too much.
Look at all the artists in the studio that make this place so famous. Look at what all the problems they had and what they
you've
came
seen.
from. Prince, Eddie, Jim Morrison.
I
on and
met
on and
Prince
on.
here, but I was shooting baskets out there, and he came walking out, and he walks up, and I tossed the ball to him, and he caught it, and he says, "Oh, I'm Prince." I said, "I'm Doug." He turned and took a shot, and it went in, and then he kept walking up to one. He walked past me to Studio One. That's my moment with Prince. It was
Holy
here,
cow.
and then you brought that girl in my studio, Apollonia.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that? Did you ever put it out?
No, she hasn't released anything yet. I don't know why she's not.
Because that was a good interview.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Everything I produce is good, Doug.
Well, it should be. You're Drew. You're Drew.
Yeah.
Drew Dempsey. Do you know Dan Dempsey?
I
A
don't.
producer? He's a record producer.
Yeah.
He helped do a group called Solos at my studio. It was an amazing record. Dave Jordan heard it and he wanted to do them. He said, I want to produce those guys because the guy who produced them was Guy Massey from Abbey Road.
Yeah.
He's been in my studio for 3 records. And what we did with him is we did 16-inch, 2-inch tape at 15 IPS. And Guy Massey took the tapes to England and gave them to some guy over there to mix. And then about 7 months later, he called me one day. He says, "Can you get me some more Scotch 250 tape? We're going to try to do what we did at your studio at Abbey Road with some new band they had." He called me about a month later. He said, "Your room was better for this approach than Abbey Road."
What?
Ask Guy Massey. When you see him, say, "Guy Massey, tell me about Doug Messenger's studio." Now, the next thing he came to my studio with was a disaster. There was a producer named Josh Henry, and he had these 2 young girls who thought they were going to Fleetwood Mac, but they weren't. And it was a disaster. And the tape that they bought was defective tape. It was brand new tape. It was defective. And instead of just saying, okay, so we're not going to use 1 and 24, we'll use from track 2 to track 23 and do it. This guy threw a fit and blamed me. He says, you bought bad tape. I said, it's the only tape that's available. I bought it. And it's brand new. I can't help it if it's a defective tape. And you got around it. You ended up doing okay. He's one of those guys. He told me, if you ever say a word about this to anybody, I'm going to sue you. You hear that, Mr. Henry?
Wow.
Guy Massey, he's a cool guy. He remastered all the Beatles stuff. And he said, I tried to keep it close to the original, but with a little more definition.
All right. So where were we? I got 3 more questions and we're done.
One thing.
Go ahead.
We were talking about Mike Chapman for a minute, and we stopped. So I'd made this demo for him, this girl, Holly Penfield. And this is just fun stuff, what I'm going to tell you. So He did sign her to his label, and they made 5 records. And Holly Knight, who's a famous writer now, had one of the groups. The group was called Spider, and I think they intentionally made their label sink so they could write it off to what they owed the IRS. Because those 5 bands got nowhere, but some of the people from those bands became famous afterward. He really had an ear for it. But I went to see, he called me one day, he said, hey, it's my birthday tonight, come on over. So I went over to MCA Whitney. You ever hear of that studio?
Yep.
It had 2 Neve rooms.
Frank Zappa worked on Hot Rats there.
It had a full-on church organ, 20-foot pipes. And he was doing Tanya Tucker in one room and Holly Penfield in the other. So Mike comes in dressed in an army uniform with medals and all the stuff that they have, and he has a pipe like Franklin Roosevelt, a little cigarette holder. And there was a couch, and behind it was one of those Italian lamps where it's a piece of metal that's like a bar that comes out, and then there's a thing over the little coffee table and stuff. Chapman walks over to near the coffee table, and there's that thing hanging, starts banging his head against it, right? Looks down at the birthday cake they had put on the table for him and sinks his face into the cake. He goes, that's Mike Chapman, complete insanity. And you're going, you're producing, and he says, get me a towel. He wipes all the stuff off his face. He says, get that guy out in the front to go buy another cake, stuff. And so he says, I'll be back in a minute. He goes into Tanya Tucker room. She comes out, and this is, my days as a young pretty boy, I had all the hair and all the shit.
Tanya Tucker was recording
Tanya
that?
Tucker.
She's recording. She recorded that album. She won the Grammy for Best Country Album with Shooter
she's
Jennings
good.
in Studio 3. They just recorded that 2 years ago.
Cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
She's nuts, though.
First album in 20 years.
I was there with my wife, Cindy, right? And Tanya Tucker comes walks straight toward me and grabs me by the middle. Out of nowhere. She was this crazy young chick. She goes like that, and I pushed her hand away, and Cindy stepped in. He says, the next time you're going to end up dead. Cindy was a tough chick.
All right, we're going to have to cut that
Cindy
out.
just told her, you do that again, you're dead. And of course, she didn't mean it. And then Chapman went down to the room with this Holly Penfield chick who was doing a song called Don't Bang on That Piano was the name of the song. And it was a shitty song. And then they were doing another one that was a very good song. I don't remember what it was. But Chapman is that kind of a guy. He'll do crazy shit, but he's a guy who has an idea. He knows when a lick, like one of the licks I did on the Holly Penfield thing, I made it up on the spot. When he heard it, there are 5 songs we had to do. We had to learn them and record them in 5 days. A guy mixed them named Steve Jarvis. He wasn't much of an engineer, but the studio, that's how I met Armin Steiner and then Bill Robinson, because Armin Steiner noticed that I made good comments, and he told me, come here, son, and he said, you should be an engineer, because you've noticed things in what you're doing here today that the engineer didn't notice. Because Chapman just put us there with no engineer, no anything.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a producer yet. I didn't.
I've been meaning to ask you, switching channels, had you ever come across Alan Holdsworth? Did you ever hang out with him? Never saw him play, never hung out with him?
I know that he's right now on the rise among young guitar players.
Alan Holdsworth?
Yeah,
no,
people are talking about him. I had a kid tell me last night, a guy who's 23 years old said, who's Alan Holdsworth?
You mean people are talking about him now?
They're talking about him.
Because you know him and Eddie's relationship, and they had worked together.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Ted Templeman. He made Ted Templeman produce Alan Holdsworth.
Eddie told me that the things he most liked were the Beatles and Eric Clapton and Cream. That he never really was into Hendrix until later when he heard Hendrix a lot. Because what I took from that was because the Beatles and Cream were very much more organized sounding bands, It wasn't wild. And at that point, Ed loved the Beatles. He just loved them, and he loved that. And he didn't mention too many other things that he liked. He loved, his two favorite guitar players other than Spider were Billy Gibbons.
Billy Gibbons.
Billy Gibbons and Billy Gibbons and Eric Clapton. And he said, I learned how to play all the Cream stuff. And Billy Gibbons, I just listened to because he's so cool.
Yes.
And I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere.
Speaking of the kids today, I know that there's the know-it-all Van Halen people that know every single thing, but there's also a reason we do this show is to, the up-and-coming guitarists today can learn about Van Halen that maybe haven't been around for 60 years to know everything. Mm-hmm. So everybody's on a learning curve here. But if you had a Van Halen, if you had a kid that came to your studio and wanted to hear Van Halen, what is the first song that you would play them? If they said, I want to hear a Van Halen song, I've never heard them, what song would you play for them?
That's tough.
What a great question.
That's
Drew.
too tough a question.
No.
You die after this interview. Oh, my God. What? Just for sheer rock and roll, I'd say Ain't Talking About Love.
I think there's probably 60% of people that would say that.
Because I think that's something that has enough to it that different types of people would like it. It isn't like I'm the One, which is just, a railroad train going. It has a nice it's really cool. Jamie's Crying's too cute. Jump
Street?
is too cute.
Main Street's too dark.
It's a song of Van Halen that I love. One of my favorite Van Halen songs is with Sammy Hagar singing. It's that with the country thing.
I don't know.
I'll think of it later. I'll stop the interview and I'll throw it in.
Sure, yeah. So to close here, we have documented that you're going to give me your Stevens tape machine. That is documented now, and you said yes. But a lot of people got on my case because I interrupted your Jimi Hendrix story last time. Let's talk about you and Jimi Hendrix. How did you first meet him? And that was at the...
Didn't I explain that? No,
yeah.
I did. I did with Joey D.
Well, no, I interrupted you last time, and then everyone's like, fucking Drew.
So you want me to go right from the top?
Yeah, I mean, briefly. But
okay.
You saw Jimmy at playing for...
Joey D and the Starlighters.
Where was that at?
At the Tiger's Tail in Revere Beach. It was one of the 4 bars that were along there, and they all had music. There was the Tiger's Tail, there was the Lewis Room, there was Ebb Tide, and there was Alfonso's. They were all owned by the mob, the kind of guys who at the end of the night, when they're trying to close the club, would come in and say, hey, get the fuck out of here. That's how they talked. Yeah. That Italian thing. It was really funny. And they loved the mob loves musicians. They treat you like you're extra something. You could be the shittiest little band in Boston, and they'll treat you well, and they'll tell the waitresses if they want anything, give it to them. If they want pizza, get them the pizza, et cetera. So, yeah, I was playing in a band called Bobby Ace and the Stacked Deck. It was an R&B band. We were doing James Brown, Motown. Uh-huh. Motown, was done. Berry Gordy is a genius. He didn't want it to be very funky or very black. That's why the drums are always straight 4 on the snare or a backbeat on the snare. Tattin, 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 a lot of that, or just tattin, tattin, always. And it had to be palatable to whites and blacks alike. And he thought of it in those terms. This I know because I know people who knew him. And I know Smokey Robinson's guitar player very well. We were buddies in Boston. He's a white guy named Bob Boogie Bowles. Terrific guitar player. And so there are all these bars there, and and the mob's running them and all that. And we finished early one night at the Lewis Room, and we said, let's go and watch the band up there at Tiger's Tail, because that was the best one was the Ebb Tide. That's the one where they had a lot of like the Temptations and things like that, and the local bands that were like the 3 Degrees, some Boston girls who had a hit record. Well, When Will I See You Again? You've probably heard it. But so anyway, we walk into the Tiger's Tail, and the guy at the door says, "Hey," because all the bars in Boston knew all the musicians, and come on in, man. Hey, Jimmy's here. Da da da. And I look up on the stage, and there are 2 backup singers who later became the Young Rascals.
Oh, wow.
Eddie Brigati and Felix
Cavalieri.
Cavalieri.
Yeah.
He and I almost started a band together, but
No way.
we saw that he still wanted to do a slightly poppy R&B thing when I was already thinking Hendrix and Zeppelin and Cream and Power, So, but he's a nice guy, very nice guy. And I met him here, David Braun, who's manager for a lot of people, George Harrison, Michael Jackson, and Jack Nicholson. He managed a lot of people. Michael Jackson was stolen from him by his own protege, John Branca. But anyway, so there's Hendrix. I didn't know who he was, and they were playing a couple of songs, and then it was the end of the night. And I said, that guitar player is really good. He had played the guitar behind his head, and he had played it with his teeth, and he had played it between his legs. He didn't hump his amp the way he did later, which he told me the last time I saw him that he regretted doing that. He said, that was pretty crude. He said, my parents hated that. He's an Army kid, an Army brat. His dad was in the U.S. Army and Seattle. And so there's Hendrix. And the other guys walked over to Felix and the other guys, and I went straight to Hendrix. I didn't know who he was. And he had short hair. He was wearing a do-rag, which is, you just put lye on your hair, and then you put a do-rag. Those little black things some of the mob guys wear, some of the hip-hop people wear now. And sometimes they'd leave it on, sometimes they'd take it off. Because once the lye dried, your hair was stiff.
It's a do-rag.
Straight.
Yeah.
Your do-rag. So I walk up to him, "Hi, I'm Doug. I'm playing down the street. I really like your playing."
Hey,
and
man,
he says,
Jimmy.
He says, "This is just another gig." But I'd done a lot of those gigs too. Like I backed Al Green and I backed Etta James. And you'd see these people. And the mob put us down in the basement and says, "Guy, go down there. We're cleaning up right now." And so we're down there and we're playing Monopoly. There's a Monopoly game on the floor. And Hendrix said,
"Yes.
Anyone for Monopoly?" And I said, "I'll do it." And 4 of us sitting there playing Monopoly on a little table. And the mob threw us out at that point. But in the meantime, there's something about that came up this year that I'll tell you about. Just like with Ted and my Marshall amp, I had no idea that Ed had asked for that amp, and Ted didn't know where it was. But
so Jimi Hendrix and you and 2
so
others.
I'm talking to him. He says, "I'm Jimmy James." He was using that name for a while. His real name is Hendrix, and we talked about some stuff. He said, "Who do you like?" He says, "I like all kinds of guitar players. I played with King Curtis for a while, and I've done this and I've done that, and Don Covey, some of the people that I like too. Curtis Mayfield," he mentioned. And so that's all that happened that night. Move 5 years ahead. That was.
Did you get his phone number, or just like, okay, that was cool playing Monopoly,
you'll
Jimmy
see what
James?
happened. I didn't get anything then.
Gotcha.
People didn't do that then.
Fast forward 5 years later in Hollywood.
Well, remember, that was 1965. First week of December in 1965.
What a memory.
And that one I found online, that Jimi Hendrix had played in Massachusetts the first week of December of 65. So move ahead 5 years to 1970. A friend of mine, Danny Weiss, and I met over at the Whiskey one morning, and there's another guy we knew had an amp, and he wanted to take the amp somewhere to repair it, and I said, put it in my. In those days, you could just park your car in front of the whiskey. They didn't shoo you away immediately if there was nothing going on. And I look across the street, and there's Hendrix. There's a little place called the Music Hall, a little LP place. They sold LPs and 45s.
Yeah.
And it's Hendrix. I said, that's Hendrix, man. I didn't recognize him as the guy I had met.
So this is 1970.
This is 1970, probably late February,
Okay.
early March, somewhere in there.
Hey, Jimmy, you want to play some Monopoly?
No, it went the other way. Wait till you see what happened. So anyway, I was looking and I said, I'll take the guy's amp and get it fixed later, because they're not going to go on for a few hours. There were 4 bands as usual setting up at the whiskey. And this might have been somewhere maybe around noon or a little after. And I ran over there to see Hendrix. And there were people crowded around him, and he's writing a few autographs. He looked like hell, man. He looked dirty and greasy, and his hair was sticking out. He didn't look like the guy I had met.
Yeah.
The guy I had met was a neat, clean-cut guy with pants with creases in the pants and patent leather pumps for shoes.
Sure.
Very elegant guy the first time I saw Hendrix. And I said, that's Jimi Hendrix, man. And I had Are You Experienced? And I had Axis Bold as Love. And I thought Axis Bold as Love was an amazing, I still think it's a great record.
Time out real quick. So you had met him before those records were recorded. Then they were recorded, and were you like,
and that's when
I played Monopoly with that guy.
Yeah.
Were you blown away that those records?
Wait, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I didn't know that it was that guy.
All right.
So I went over, and I'm standing in the crowd, and he starts shooing people away, and he gets an opening, and I'm standing there, with my long hair, and I was a sharp dresser back then. I mean, I wore stuff from the South Sea Bubble in London and all the better places, and expensive shoes and shit. And Hendrix looks through the crowd at me, and he stops all of a sudden, and he goes, I know you. He pointed at me to tell me he knew me. I said, I know you, but I don't know you, but I know who you are. You're Jimi Hendrix. He goes, I said, your records are amazing, man. It's like way beyond what I'm doing right now. And he was a thank you, man. He spoke real soft, very soft, a gentle speaker. I mean, he'd be talking like this here. Hey, yeah, man, that's groovy. That's cool. That kind of a talker. And very articulate. And he started that, and he says, I'm kind of fucked up right now, but people, come on. Let me talk to this guy. So they went away. A couple of the girls stood at a distance hoping to meet him. And I said, let's take a walk. So we walked down. There used to be Book Soup up there. They moved way down to the other, at the bottom there by Tower Records. And I said, let's take a walk. So we're walking down Sunset, and he's telling me, man, it took us about 5 minutes to figure out how he knew me and where he had met me. At first it was, I know you. I said, no, you don't know me. I know you. You don't know me. No, I know you. And so he said, okay, where are you from? I'm from Seattle. Where are you from? Boston. He says, I've played in Boston. Maybe it was Boston. And that's how we got around to Revere Beach and Boston and Joey D and the Starlighters. So we figured it out. Incredible. And all of a sudden, it's that kind of brotherhood feeling that musicians have when you meet someone, and then it happens again later, and it's kind of cool. And here he is, a big deal, and I'm still just, 1970. I didn't play.
You were with Van Morrison then, right?
No, I didn't play with Van till the end of the year.
Okay.
I hadn't played with him yet. We're walking down, and he says, I'm sorry, man, I'm really fucked up right now. He says, I got to stop doing drugs, man. He says, right now I'm fucked up. And I said, well, let's talk about it. And he says, no, I don't want to talk about it. And I said, I want to talk about it.
Because you didn't do drugs. And
I didn't do any drugs.
He said he looked all messed up, scruffled.
He looked totally fucked up.
Was
and
it
he
heroin?
said, I'm fucked up, I'm dizzy right now and all that. And he said, well, you're making sense, but you're not making sense when you say, let's talk about something else. You've got to talk about the drugs. And I said, look, man, I've known you for 5 years. That was back in Boston in 1965. That's before you guys were born. How old were you? When were you born?
83.
So you weren't even here yet, any of you. And here I was
a glimpse
playing
in my
in
father's
a band.
eye.
And so we're talking about it. And I said, I went in that liquor store that's still there. It's halfway down that block. And I got a little matchbook and a pen from the guy in the liquor store. And I wrote my phone number in it. And 213 area code 6548209. Okay, you like the memory shit.
Yeah.
And I wrote my number and I handed it. I said, Jimmy, call me. We can stop the drugs if you talk to me. I've been in bands with guys who are shooting heroin, guys who are doing meth, crystal meth. Crystal meth. They've done secanols, blackies, perps, all the different drugs that were available. There were a lot of pills. People took a lot. Now you just go to a doctor, and any doctor you go to, you just tell him you have a disease. He'll give you 5 pills. They don't want to be doctors anymore. They just want to give you a prescription.
Yeah.
It's pitiful. So anyway, I told him, call me. He says, I'll call you soon, man. And so we walked back up, and then I walked over to the whiskey, took the guy's amp down to Modern Music, waited, got it fixed, took it back. It just needed a tube. I don't remember that guy, who he was. Can't remember. And my friend Danny had
Where
gone.
did you leave Jimmy at? On Sunset? Did you guys split ways?
Yeah.
Or did he
We
walk?
just split.
What hotel was he staying
We
at?
started walking back up to the place, and somewhere where we started, I ran across the street to the whiskey, said goodbye to him, and I don't know where he went.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the type. I probably should have said, where are you staying, and go over there with him to really try to get into it right away. But I had other shit to do, and I was young, very young, and I just left. I thought he'd call me. He never called me. And there was a bad joke I used to make. He says, if Doug asks you to call him and you don't call him, you die. Because 4 months later, Hendrix was dead.
Jesus.
4 months later. August or so? July or August?
I think it was July.
July, yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, he was very nice guy. And we talked about the Monopoly a little for a minute. He says, yeah, we played Monopoly. One of the first things he said.
Who won?
We didn't get far enough because they came in and said, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
The mob
Hey,
threw us
Jimmy
out.
James.
Yeah, Jimmy James. No, one of the first things he said when he said, I know you, and when we figured out that where we had met, he says, yeah, we played Monopoly. He brought it up there. And I said, yeah, we did. So anyway,
I can't believe he remembered that and you did not.
I wasn't even thinking about it.
Sure.
I was just, Jesus Christ, I just
Well, I
talked to
think Jimi Hendrix is more
Hendrix.
intelligent than you are, to tell you
Probably.
the truth.
Please, he had to be smarter than I am. He played better guitar than I did.
Let me ask you the same question I did for Van Halen, but now with Jimi Hendrix. There's a kid that's 18 years old, comes to your studio, doesn't know Jimi Hendrix. What's a Jimi Hendrix track you would play to introduce his music to that young kid?
What do you know about what he likes so far?
The kid?
Yeah, the kid.
He likes Tool and Gary Clark Jr.
Well, if he likes Tool, then he likes fairly hard stuff. So I would turn him on to Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock. Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock. And Voodoo Child.
Yep.
They're the two.
Reprise.
They're the two. Did I win?
Yeah.
So anyway, one more thing about Monopoly. There's a guy named Nicky Karula. He's an Indian American kid, a really amazing guy, terrific songwriter and performer, but he'll never make a good record because he does the mixes, and it's a disaster, and he doesn't know it. A total disaster. I watched him in my studio twice now. Ugh, Nicky, come on. And I set it up. Yeah, but I want to hear this guy because he sat in with John Mayer. Ugh, shut up. That isn't the point. The point is this song. He's that kind of guy. But anyway, he called me about 6 months ago. He said, I never believed you about Monopoly and Hendrix.
Yeah.
I said, well, I believe you now. I said, why? I'm reading something here, and he read it to me, about how whenever the Hendrix family gets together, they play Monopoly, the whole family. And it was Hendrix who had seen the game and said, hey, Monopoly. I was like, Monopoly? Okay, let's play. But apparently it was a big thing to the Hendrix family.
I believe you.
This guy read it to me.
Legendary guitarist and producer, and you've... So, and you had 2 encounters with Jimi Hendrix then.
Yes,
and they were obviously very personal, both of them. So, yes. I mean, it wasn't just
they were very... I've met other guys who was nothing, like Felix Cavalieri of the Young Rascals. I met him. We hit it off great, but I have no memory of another guy was Dave, a guy who sang Dirty Work on Steely Dan's first record, Dave something. Mm-hmm. I can barely remember his name. I can't even remember his last name. I've met a lot of people. Met Diana Ross once at a Foster Freeze, but it was nothing like meeting Jimi Hendrix.
Let me ask you this.
It was special even without my knowing.
So I interviewed Rodney Bingenheimer, who used to hang out with Jimi Hendrix, and that interview's up. But do you remember a band called Cake?
I remember the name, but I don't remember.
Well, they used to hang out with Jimi Hendrix, and they actually had a house that was shaped like a cake. It was circular up in the Hollywood Hills. But I guess Jimi Hendrix stayed at that house. So I wonder if he was there. Second question, do you remember a band called Volar X? They used to open up for Van Halen, and they would dress up as space people. And
no, when I'd see Van Halen, he was so magnetic to me.
They were an L.A. band at that time.
Yeah,
that was kind of around. I thought you might know
them. I remember
them.
seeing the name, but I didn't know them at all. I don't even remember who they were playing opposite. The only thing I remember them playing opposite before they were signed was a group called Ziggy and the Zoo from Chicago. And the reason I remember that is that I got the keyboard player from that band to come out here to start a band with me. He was amazing. He got killed in a car accident, and that was the end of that group. I had two bands that went to pieces because of deaths.
All right. I got to ask you one more question that has nothing to do with music. You're from Boston. Did you ever come across, and speaking of mobsters, did you ever come across Whitey Bulger?
Yes.
You did. I knew it.
I did, because you had to. When you're playing at the Intermission Lounge, and in Rhode Island playing at Raymond Patriarca's place, he was the big guy in Rhode Island, Raymond Patriarca, at Ziggy's in Rhode Island, and another club called the Gaiety at Go-Go. That had nothing to do with being gay. Gaiety then meant feeling good. And Raymond Patriarca and his son were there a lot, and I got to know his son. But in Boston, the Boston guys were Whitey Bulger, Joe Bolero and his brothers, Louis and Freddie Venus, Izzy Ort, and a bunch of guys with Italian names. But I got to meet a number of them because he'd play at their... We played at the Intermission Lounge, which was the Bolero brothers. We played there for 16 weeks straight.
Wow. This
is where the band musicians then were better than today. And people say, oh, that's bullshit. Yes, we had more variety. Today you have kids who are amazing in one little area, and that's it. We had to play everything. We played 6 sets a night, 7 nights a week, and 2 sets Saturday afternoon, 2 Sunday afternoon. That is 46 sets in 1 week, 40-minute sets. By the time you've done it for 16 weeks, the band is a machine.
I bet.
And you get so good. It's like practicing all day.
But Whitey Bulger, did you ever talk to him?
Yes. I didn't talk to him, but he came in to talk to the Boleros.
Okay.
So I remember him talking to Joe Bolero, Billy Bolero, Bruno Bolero, all those guys. And I remember they were at a table, and whenever that kind of thing happened, they either went upstairs, there was a room up there, a tap room of some kind that was just for the mob, or they would tell everyone who was down in the main club in the afternoon, go downstairs. You don't notice nothing. And that's...
Well, they found him in Santa Monica.
Yeah,
he was
a couple blocks walking a dog or something.
Well, no, he was... the woman he was living with became too friendly with a neighbor, and she ratted on him when she figured out who they were.
Figured out. Oh, man.
And then he got,
He was
his
known-
first day when he got transferred into general population, they ripped out his tongue and killed him in prison.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have been the Boleros having it done for them.
Why would they have? Well, and they never should have put him in general population. It was like he got transferred to general population in prison. One, he was like in a wheelchair.
Here in L.A.?
No, in Massachusetts.
Oh, I didn't know they had taken him back.
Yeah. They found him guilty on,
yeah.
tons of murder charges, everything. And then within like an hour, somebody cut out his tongue because he was a rat.
And killed him.
I didn't say he's a rat. I heard that he was a rat. Winter Hill Gang.
He was. These guys were frightened.
Doug said he was a rat, not Drew.
The mob guys in Boston were scary people. Give you an example. I'm playing with Roger Pace and the Pacemakers.
Well, we got to go talk to. 2 minutes ago, we're supposed to meet Paul to talk before he leaves. Should we hold on to that pacemaker story for the next one?
I'll hold it on. Hold on. Hold something.
Again, Doug Messenger is on Instagram. I appreciate you coming in, buddy. It's fun to do these, isn't it? You're a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
A great memory, and you've been around.
I like that you allow me to come in totally unprepared because I think I do better that way.
I don't script anything. I don't research.
Yeah.
I have 4 topics, and then we kind of just... I don't even tell you what they are, but it's fun to just have a conversation because you don't know what you're going to remember also. I don't want you to think apples and oranges and we talk bananas. Mm-hmm. So, again, Doug has Doug Messenger Studio in North Hollywood if you want a good studio to record at. I love that room. Also, Doug Messenger's on Instagram, and you have your Google business page up. We do have 50 Van Halen work order prints that are just so cool. They're at sunsetsoundstore.com. Use the discount code Doug for 10% off. Final thoughts on anything? Anything we need to know that you've thought of? That was a great Bill Church story you told.
Well, I think it's interesting to see that Ronnie Montrose and Bill Church were together for a while, and when Church left Montrose because Montrose wanted a different kind of, not a rock band, which I think it was his mistake. Yeah. He would have been better to do what he tried to do at my studio in 2003. That was pretty good, even though I think between Ricky and the other guy and whoever else was involved, it lost the Montrose feeling.
Yeah.
And Ronnie's had just done the basic rhythm tracks with Ricky and Eric Singer. But that little video that you should go look at, it's on YouTube, and they're at some room. If you look at the little pictures on YouTube, it's a bar of some kind, and they just have their amps sitting there on the floor, no stage. Ronnie, Danny McNay on guitar, on bass, Randy Scholes singing, and a blonde guy, stocky guy on drums, and they do a song, and there it's even just a little jam. It's Montrose, man. You can feel that thing that Ronnie had. Yeah. But on the stuff that Eric Singer and Ricky Phillips did at my studio, they lost that feeling. When you hear Edgar Winter singing, Glenn Hughes singing, all these Dave Menichetti, all these amazing guys singing, 10 different ones, and somehow for me, it didn't add up.
All right, Doug, I appreciate you coming on so much. That's a roundtable. Yes.